Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Hannah Gillott.
Hello.
And Dominic Bristow.
Morning.
It's fantastic to see you both. Really looking forward to exploring the potential of artificial intelligence in education. But I thought it might make sense, because it's your first time on the podcast, to start with a bit about where you are and how you got here today.
Hi, yeah. So my name's Dominic. I was a secondary school teacher, actually, for my sins. So apologies to the audience for being, the other phase. But I was a physics teacher and a middle leader in schools, mostly in East London. And I loved the job. Loved the relationships. Loved the kids. It was definitely a vocation for me. I've worked in education ever since. But there was a point when I just was spending too much time outside the classroom with a red pen. So that's sort of my core personal thesis and my motivation, and why I spend the rest of my time working in educational technology and various projects trying to solve that or these problems, and have come back round to a position where now I'm in the very, very fortunate position to have some support in running Stylus. So Stylus is a small company of devout educationists and technologists, and I've had the pleasure of working with Hannah in a couple of different capacities now. So Hannah was with me on the previous incarnation of a similar product. We'll talk maybe a bit more about that in detail, but that's me. Oh, I recently had twins. I'm a twin dad. I'm very proud of it. I just thought I'd throw that in as a human angle as well.
So I am also former secondary English teacher. So I started teaching in 2011 and was head of English. Started in a school in Forest Gate, then moved over to Ilford, and had almost 10 years teaching. Absolutely loved it. Loved the classroom. Loved my school. Loved the students. Left because after many conversations speaking to year 13 students about all of their projects for the future and where they wanted to be and the careers they wanted to explore, I got itchy feet myself, and I thought, well, I want to try something else as well. So similar to Dominic, I made the jump over into working in education technology instead, but I have stayed on as a governor at the last school that I worked in, and I'm also a governor in all three school as well. So still very much getting to spend lots of time in and out of the classroom and speaking to teachers.
Fantastic. I think mentioning the twins is a smart move. Get the audience on side early on. In the past, I've had pictures of my sons on the first slide of a presentation, just to sort of, why, again, I don't know, grease the wheels, so to speak. And so I'm only really dipping my toe into the role of artificial intelligence. And so I've obviously spoken to Neil Almond, who is a teacher who has a keen interest. And I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to you guys, because you're almost on the other side of the fence, or the other side of the coin, where you are working in this world and have extensive experience of the classroom. And so really, I'd like to see your perspective on the potential of artificial intelligence in education. Does AI currently have the power to improve teacher practice?
There's a lot to say here. I think it's worth just starting with a couple of core concepts, a couple of fundamentals. You'll not be surprised to hear, as former teachers ourselves, we very much see humans, teachers, but humans continuing to be the very core and the essential part of all of the educational process. Humans at the heart, And so insofar as there are ways that these AI models are able to improve teaching practice, they all happen by amplifying that, the teacher. I can imagine lots of great examples in already, but certainly in the near future. It's very clear to me from looking at these technologies that independent work through AI tutors will be very, very powerful. Will be very, very powerful, and it'll be a supplementary, education. However, that's essentially for young people who engage already with these models, with these technologies. And that's just not, in our experience, where a lot of the most important parts of education come from. Kids work for teachers. They work bums on seats for the human in front of them. That's where the relationship comes from. Is the kind of the wielding of educational practice and experience, and that charisma that teachers have in the eyes of kids, that means that they they keep looking at it, keep trying, and so that is irreplaceable. So then there's, what can we do? You can break it down into a few areas. You've got, teaching knowledge, teaching skills in the classroom, say, then you've got data that you can use as time moves on in order to wield these skills and the knowledge that you built up as you were training, right? So just looking at those three specifically, and there are ways in which, like I said, we can support children with additional resources, with personalization and so on. There's a lot that we do as stylists in that light, but not focusing on that for a minute, staying kind of a bit less esoteric and product focused, and instead just talking in the widest, broadest level. Knowledge, skills, insight, let's say, sort of the data available, the three core areas, I think. Although I'd be interested in your opinion on that we can break down sort of, what teachers are using in the classroom into. Now, teaching knowledge is something that, you build up as an ECT when you're training to be a teacher. You can read all the books. And in a way, there's something equatable to these AI models about specifically that. They know all the stuff, right? And you can ask them really intricate questions about teaching pedagogy and the application of this and the literature here, and bar hallucinations. There's a lot that we can do to avoid that now, and really it shouldn't be much of a problem if you're careful, but that's another story. They will know all the stuff. We don't know everything, can't know everything. There is in fact this sort of very human scale limit, therefore, on getting that into people. And actually, we've already got vast arrays of really high quality materials for training teachers. So there is, I think, a limited scope for improvement, in getting better teacher knowledge into brains. And we're already pretty good at that. And actually the limit is our capacity to learn and apply and remember and so on. And then so skills is different. I think straight away, we are now in a position where I've seen some extraordinary examples of long transcripts or recordings being put into an AI model, and some really amazing insights being pulled out. So as a teacher coach, for example, it would be super applicable immediately to record a lesson and drop it into one of the new models, probably even 4.0 Mini, which is one available for free on chat.com now, by the way. OpenAI bought chat.com. Go chat.com in your browser, and you've got a free, very, very powerful, very, very fast model, which is a sort of state of the art for its size. So small ones, faster, cheaper. For its size, it's state of the art 4.0 Mini. You can stick it in there and say, what did I do wrong? What can I do next time? You'd get some really valuable stuff out. So like as a coach, we're already in a really exciting place, but still, a human can do that. How much benefit is there? You're still only learning a certain amount. It's a sort of bottleneck maybe. So what we're really excited about, and what I think is the most, the keyest area for me is it keyest? I'm going with it. It is the sort of the data area, data insight. And that's because we can only be in one place at one time. And that is not true of AI models. So insofar as you can find things where they can support a single job that a human would be, a teacher would be able to do, it can do that, they can do that 1,000 times over, or 1,000 times at once, 100 times over. So it could do, 1,000 different decisions for 100 kids affordably, actually, now. It's really, really, that's where we are. And so, in ways, as long as you can get the sort of the assimilation of the actual work, which, in this case means, like, I guess, scanning in student work or, whatever it is, any assessment in any level of detail across any group of kids is something that we're able to do. And that is truly now, is non-human scale. And we can get vast benefits there. Walking into a classroom in the morning and knowing from all of the work that the kids did yesterday, exactly who did what and who need, is that sort of same day intervention stuff suddenly becomes really, really, really feasible. That's really exciting to me. So that breaking it down like that, I think that's the simplest way to say yes.
So something else that we talk about a lot as a team is the difference between what computers can do and what humans can do. What's the computer work? What's the human work? And I think the human work is the thing that keeps teachers teaching. So the interactions that you have in the corridor, seeing a student have a light bulb moment, which sounds very cliched when you say it, but really is the stuff that makes teaching such an enjoyable career. ChatGPT is not going to feel anything when a student suddenly understands a concept, but I'm going to drive home in my car smiling because this kid I've been trying to support for weeks and weeks has finally got it, and I did that. And I think we need to be thinking about it as, how do we create opportunities for teachers to be able to do those really great human things and take away the computer side. I enjoy reading an individual student piece of work and seeing what they got, but I don't enjoy taking home 30 exercise books and spending my entire evening going through those. And that's the kind of thing that AI can do in a much more straightforward way. It can pull all of the information out. It can tell me who needs support. It can tell me who's done really well, who's met a target that I've been setting them for the last 4 or 5 essays, and create that moment for me to be able to pick out the book where the students suddenly mastered something that they hadn't understood before. But I think the caveat of that is that to get to being really good at the human side of teaching takes experience and takes practice. And you think of examples like, first time in an observation, someone pointed out to me that when I crouched down to give feedback to a particular table of students, I had my back to the rest of the classroom, so I couldn't see that there was distractions going on behind me. And they just simply said, change the position of where you're crouched down so you can still see everyone, and they'll stay on focus even when you're doing one-to-one support. And that level of human expertise comes from humans supporting humans. And I think part of the reason why so many teachers are being driven out of teaching is because that opportunity to get really valuable one-to-one feedback and to learn how to judge, what's the right question to ask and how long do you wait and what is the precise moment when you need to now offer a prompt to that pupil because you're losing their interest or they're losing confidence, versus when you can wait an extra couple of seconds because they know the answer. That's the kind of thing we need to create time to do. And I think that's where AI can really improve teacher practice if we use it to take away some of that computer work, allow time for those more one-to-one conversations, but always supported by experts. Because I think there is maybe a tendency, particularly early in your career, to focus on getting the work done, get the lesson planned, get the resources created, get to the point where you can say, okay, that's ticked off the list. And actually, we need to be spending time thinking more about what's a really good lesson, what's a really good resource for this activity, what does that pupil need? So I would see it as guided by experts, with experts overseeing it. We use AI to create the one-to-one human time to improve teacher practice and to create the moments that teachers will really enjoy and will make them better teachers and keep them in the classroom.
What Hannah's just been talking about there, this thing about educational experience and the depth of experience that comes in from and pedagogical understanding in sort of experienced practitioners. It exists in all those ways, in the sort of very human scale kind of way. It's also, I realized there's something I didn't talk about here, which is about the fact that these models don't work very well out of the box. And one of the reasons for that is that it's all very well having access to all the educational literature. It's almost like a day one ECT who's read the whole reading list already, right? Do you know what I mean? So that they've got no experience whatsoever of the classroom. They don't really understand what it's like. They don't understand when you put this question to 10 kids, what they will say and how that's different, because that sort of experience doesn't get written down in books very well, and it will look different in different places and different contexts, totally. And so it's very hard to do that. You can't write a single book that will exactly represent what it's like in every classroom, right? That only you have to sort of distill the things that are the same in every classroom, and therefore you take out the experience, the experiential data in a way. So I've always loved your thinking deeply moniker, right? And it's something that we think that you have to do anyway with your own practice when you're applying it to the model, but certainly when you're looking at applications of these models. It's all very well saying this thing I was talking about with 1,000 decisions across 100 kids. What are those 1,000 decisions? How do you apply them? In what framework? In what order? All of this has to be worked out. You can't do it straight out of the box really very well. And that's where hallucinations get added in, that there are only certain fundamental things that these models can do. They take a huge amount of data, which they've been given in their training data, and summarize it in some way. So you give it a book's text to add to its core training data, and then ask it to represent it in a sentence. It's really good at that, sort of summarizing. Really good at translating from one thing to another. So actually languages, you're really good at changing it from English to French, but they're also, you could say, take this sentence and say it like I'm a 5-year-old, for example. So a classic example, really, really good at that. They're good at also at expansion or extrapolation, where you say, write me a story about X, and they will do that. But a lot of the time, that's actually where the hallucination of the bias and the training data gets, expanded and amplified. But you see, with that in mind, and given that they don't have any of their own experience, you have to do all of the work to do what I sometimes call paint by exclusion. So in this case, what that means is when you're doing your prompts, or all the information that you give, have to get rid of all of the possible other ways that you can construe that. Because these models are brilliant at finding, particularly because they have inherent volatility. So, they aren't the same every time. They're not deterministic systems. They wouldn't sound like they do if they were. And so, you put the same prompt in 10 different models, you'll always get 10 different answers. Now, within that, if you haven't got rid of all the possible ways that you can understand that question that you've given it, it will find some, one of them might be what you intended, but the other 9, often won't be, unless you've thought of everything. You've painted by exclusion, by which I mean you've said all the things which it's not. So what's left is just what you want. And if you do that, which you have to apply educational experience and the how to construe these texts and so on in a particular application, then you know what those 1,000 things are to ask, and then it looks quite different. But it's it's just valuable stepping off from what Hannah was saying. I think she added an important part to my previous thesis.
I think that's a great way to look at it. And if you haven't already trademarked that phrase, you definitely should, because it's certainly a really useful way to think about the prompt writing process. Because I've been there a million times, and I can see why it's given me the response it's given me, and then I kick myself for not giving it a more specific prompt and for not, like you say, excluding sort of the information. Now in general, I love the sound of this, because I'm reasonably underwhelmed by the use of artificial intelligence or the possible options at the moment, to the point where, I think my skepticism was naturally, inherent from the beginning, but I want to believe. But the scale that you're describing and the complexity of the decision making and the sort of tasks that we can sort of utilize artificial intelligence with, I think sounds really, really positive. Is there a certain threshold in terms of the trust that the profession would need to place in artificial intelligence before they will willingly accept? Or will you have to convince teacher by teacher, or will anyone have to convince teacher by teacher, here's what this can do? What do you guys think about that?
I think in the same way that when you first have a beginner teacher assigned to you to work with your class for the year, the first thing they do is observe some lessons, and they get a sense for how you teach and what a well-structured lesson looks like. And then maybe they teach part of a lesson and you give them feedback and you let them know if, that was why that bit worked well and why that bit didn't, and how to make this part more predictable. It's something I've really been enjoying. Adam Boxer on Twitter talking about predictability of teaching, and I think you apply the same model here. You help a beginner teacher to understand how to make things predictable in the classroom, and when they have a sense of that, you build up to letting them take a whole lesson. And when they're taking a whole lesson and you've observed them and you're happy with it and you're giving them lots of feedback, eventually they're a qualified teacher and they have their own class and away they go, and the rest is history. And I think if you take the same sort of approach to introducing AI, where at first we just need to understand what it's going to do and how we want to use it and what the guardrails are, if you like. And first of all, there's lots of oversight, and someone who knows what they're doing is checking the output and saying, well, actually, this isn't a very good example of a letter home to parents, or this isn't a very good example of feedback, or this lesson plan isn't usable for the following reasons. So here's the changes we need to make. You build the trust that way. And in the same way that Dom was just talking there about sort of painting by exclusion and narrowing down all the possible outcomes until you can only create the good one, you need experts guiding it first. But I think that's why it's so important that any sort of implementation of AI in school is led by teachers, who are the people who will know if the output is good enough or not. So I would be very skeptical of anything that's claiming to come in and say straight away, just hand it off, that's taken care of now, teachers wash your hands and go and do something else, because the stakes really high in school. And it's also a very different context than many other workplaces. So we do need teachers keeping oversight, at least at the beginning, and feeling that they can trust it before they hand it over or start to scale back the amount of input they're having.
I mean, not to purposefully come in on the other side or anything, but so trust is going to be a key word for most industries and societal groups and certainly government bodies. I think now and over the next couple of years, it's a really big deal. It's a big word for us. You know, it's important, obviously, just for what we do, for it to be successful, that we're seen to be credible, and you know, and we do that by being transparent and doing the hard thinking about things. Trust is a really interesting one when you start to look in this. You know, you can in this particular paradigm of, can we take work away from teachers? You know, I think it's easy for me to say there are ways that you can. Yes. Are there still problems? Yes, there are. Once you're open about that and you do a sort of cost benefit analysis, then actually, you know, it doesn't mean that you can't move forward in trying to embed those opportunities, you know, in order to realize some of the benefit. So, for example, you know, we spend a lot of time thinking about marking. Now, what I find really interesting about our work with schools is they all think that the teacher markers are the gold standard, right? And you know, we actually know that we're not. We spent a lot of time looking at this paper. There's a white paper in 2018 that was a sort of meta-analysis of examination marking, right? And there was a, frankly, you know, indictment worthy, you know, correlation of 0.4. But in English final script marking, as in it's 40%. There's only a 40% chance that two papers are given the same grade, same final grade, right? So, which feels, and actually, when you look at it, that's in fact, Hannah might be able to correct me in a minute. There was plus or minus one grade. It was the same, something like that. It was really bad anyway, which means, you know, that really the underlying truth in inverted commas is sort of, you know, ephemeral and hard to pin down, even when you try and corroborate over a number of examiners. But in practice, that's also clearly the case. You know, we are really inconsistent and we make mistakes. It's been impossible for us to do what we need to do, have needed to do. Well, not impossible, we've done it now, but it's been nearly impossible for us to do what we've had to do to build what they call a ground truth data set, like pin down what's actually happening in this essay. You know, a piece of work we've been doing a lot of work on key stage 2 writing tasks, but it's applicable across the primary phase for sure. And the technical accuracy stuff, that, you know, the level of scrutiny that it's meant to go into in order to be properly marked against the writing criteria to build a portfolio of work, right, in year 6. You know, even our best markers, Hannah and her two and her two experts, you know, they disagree with each other, and it's a lot of the time it's human error. And you know, so we see AI as inherently artificial, but actually once you've got it right and once you've done all the painting by exclusion, it's really consistent. And we're really inconsistent. We're biased, you know, to handwriting and what we know about kids and whatever, you know, all sorts of things. We get tired really quickly, right? And we know that's true. We've had to, you know, work into our processes ways that we break up tasks so people aren't doing the same thing for a long period of time in order to increase the consistency in our training data, right? So it's really apparent to us, and less obvious probably in practice in a school, but it's really there. And so, you know, when we talk about trust, it's like, well, you know, in a way, should you be trusting yourselves? That's maybe a contentious opinion, but I, you know, it's not trivial, that, I don't think, as a question. And as time goes on, it strikes me that we are, particularly having done the work and boiled down to just a really small, sort of almost objective statement with which you can build up a lot of insight about what kids can and can't do. Quite quickly, you know, AI models are going to become the gold standard, I think.
I mean, you're speaking my language, because the inherent bias that we have greater capacity than we do is something that preoccupies me all the time. And I think your approach of doing the legwork and then ultimately you have something that's more consistent than a human being, I think makes a whole lot of sense. You know, I think perhaps I've watched too many of those crypto documentaries, because it seems like everyone at the top of the crypto chain disappears at some point. So I don't know if someone's going to disappear with my mark, and my English books will be gone. How can schools, teachers avoid spending larger, huge sums of money on repackaged LLMs or AI gimmicks? Are there any flags to look out for?
I can answer this first a little bit with my governor hat on. And I think the first question is to forget the AI in the first place and think, what's the actual problem that you're trying to solve? And before you're even considering implementing a new AI tool or a platform or a service, wherever it may be, is it actually addressing the things that are your school priorities? So if your school is falling apart and your teachers are leaving and everything's going wrong because your behavior systems are completely inconsistent and kids are running amok and there's no tracking going on between lessons, then if someone presented to me a plan that they were going to spend several £1,000s on a new lesson planning tool that would enable AI generated video content, I would say that is not going to help what is fundamentally the area of priority in this school. So I think you start with what's the problem you're trying to fix. And in some cases, the problem you're trying to fix can actually be addressed by using AI outside of the immediate problem. So a good example, I think, is with things like minute taking in meetings. If your SLT are doing hours and hours of line management meetings every week, and then they're using lots of time to go and write up actions and circulate minutes and getting into lengthy email correspondence, or you've got someone who's spending most of their day talking to staff and having to record everything, that is such a quick win for AI to bring in a tool that can do all of that note taking and summarizing and sending out actions. And then that person can go and tackle your behavior problem or your feedback problem, or your lessons are not following the method or the format that they're supposed to within that school. Maybe you've got lots of teachers who are really struggling with a particular element of their classroom practice, so free up your SLT to go out and support them. So I think you start there. What's the actual problem that you're trying to fix? Once you've identified what it is, you then look for AI tools that might be able to address that.
It's interesting, hearing you say that there, it reminds me of that classic, what do you call it? Is it in adage? The hammer and the nail thing. So, with the new technology often, and it's maybe something that's bandied around quite a lot in technologist circles, when there's a new technology, people pick it up like a really brilliant hammer and they walk around looking for a nail, right? It's like, where can I use this? Finding problems that either weren't there or they were quite small already, rather than focusing on really important pain points that really need fixing and are going to make people's lives better. And so, I just echoing really what Hannah was saying there. And in the context of what we're doing, for example, not to make it about us or anything, but, I think it's a useful one. We were, Stylus is sort of born from a project that I've been working on for a number of years. In 2019, I started looking at a way to, coming from science as a background, as a way to make the very most out of the small amount of teacher marking time that is given to a paper, say, right? And it was then offered as a product, so I had freelance teachers doing the marking. So what you'd do is have the paper of student work, which we'd scan in, and then they'd put in marks on a sort of online spreadsheet, just that, and the odd comment at the end in order to sort of summarize it. And then from that, because of everything we knew about the specification and sample questions and what they did in the previous papers and all this sort of stuff, we were able to press a button and make this amazing report, which had, this is what you did well, this is what you didn't do so well, revise this will come up on the next test, and so on. And then, I was able to sort of procedurally make papers, which means, made bespoke for each student, so that they were all different and they gave more of the things they needed to work on and less of the things they already knew about. So it was a really nice, and people really liked it. It was a nice product. However, I actually, going back to that early, my teaching story, I actually went away and made more work for people, and it's quite hard to find freelance markers who are A, good consistently, as we've just been talking about, and B, available when you need them, and this sort of thing. So it was a problem. It was already a problem. And I'd already done quite a lot of the work breaking down these curriculums into one curriculum to rule them all. So I always thought the way science was done was bonkers. But this is true really of any sort of criteria set. We've now done it with primary writing, for example. but you have to break it down really, really even more granular than it is in normal specification in order to make it, to break down the volatility and so on. Now, point is, we had a problem that we couldn't solve already. And I went away and became director of education at a maths company. And, you know, only years later was the vision technology clearly capable enough to do something about this. All right, we can scan these in and maybe we can start working on whether or not we replace most of, and we have not, by the way, fully replaced, because we still do a lot of teacher moderation at Stylus. But we had a problem with no solution, and the solution appeared. So we were this massive nail. And it's like, this is going to be amazing for teachers and it's going to be really good and they really like it. But then suddenly the hammer came along, you know. So, you know, I think that's a really valuable point for the sorts of things that are offered now. Is it a gimmick? Were you doing it? Were you needing to do it anyway? Yeah, I think it's a really good way of thinking about it. I guess the only extension that I would give onto that is, can you do it for free? You know, fundamentally. And there are a load of really amazing jobs that you can do. Well, really amazing output you can get to do jobs that you already do, which, you know, are really good straight away out of the box. But they are many fewer than those you can't do that with. And that either needs a lot of that distilling of educational thought in such a way that the models respond to, which you can absolutely learn yourself, and you'll, you know, all schools will have someone who's really into it, who's particularly good at that. So find that person and go and ask them before you buy the thing, is there a way that we could do this for free? You know, because a lot of the time the answer is essentially yes. And particularly now, go, as I said before, go to chat.com for a mini, very powerful model for it being completely free. And you can even start a conversation. It's very cool. You can start a conversation with it and go a number of prompts down, and then click a button to share that link with your kids, or, you know, in different contexts with staff, for example, and they can continue the conversation from there. So you can do a lot of work which is really easily replicable. I guess that last point on that then for me would be, you know, if we're talking about sort of pitfalls, and it's worth saying, because on the one hand, I'm quite cynical about the fact that you can do that sort of thing, but there's a lot of merit in that work being done for you. So you've got things like Teacher-matic, for example, which has, you know, a really nice environment where there's 40 different shortcuts. I met the guy who runs it recently at a conference, and I was really impressed by the way he talked about it. You know, you go in and you click, oh, you know, give me a lesson plan, like the Oak one, but it's sort of more tools based. You know, it says, how many things do I want, you know, adjusters and sliders and boxes to input things. They've done a lot of the thinking for you. So you still have to enter it and use it like a tool, but then it will produce this output. Fundamentally, you can do that for free. But, you know, in these environments, they've done a lot of the work for you. So it saves a lot of the time for you. You haven't got to learn it. So, it's, you know, and for SLT, for example, for any leadership who are listening, SLT AI is a really great environment. You know, it's the sort of thing I look at and go, come on, we can definitely do that. You know, I'll do that for you in 15 minutes. It's all very well for me to say, you know, and actually when you want the rigor of the right documents being selected and the retrieval that it uses in order to make sure that the recent guidelines are being put into your policy documents, it'll save you a whole load of time, right? So there's that kind of middle tool. But then quite soon we're going to get, I think, a move towards a service-based industry now that we can do it at the kind of scale that I'm talking about. And I guess in a way that's probably where I'd put us. We're taking a whole load of marking work away from teachers. But, you know, outside the Stylus example, that I think more and more so, rather than giving teachers a tool to do their job with, you know, the companies will have, you know, providers will be able to offer the output that those tools would produce in certain circumstances really affordably. And then you've just got to work out, there's a cost analysis, right? You just go, can we get our teachers to do that work more cheaply? And obviously, you know, given that what we want to do is fundamentally, we want to improve the lives of teachers so they're happier, better at their jobs, they've got more time to plan lessons based on the extra data that they're given by these models. And we, you know, that's what's going to make schooling better. Then obviously, you know, if we can, we should take it away from them, because there's more important things for them to do. So the opportunity cost is not a calculation that we've really done. And actually we're just driven teachers into the ground instead. And that is, you know, the antithesis of what we're about, for example. We think, you know, where you can take away the work that doesn't need to be a human. So all the really important stuff that does is given all the space and data that it can be given. So there are a lot of opportunities already, despite some pitfalls.
One more, I won't say red flag, possibly a pink flag. It's worth looking for is who's actually building the tool. So if it's educationalists who are building it, and they're building something because they've worked in schools and they know schools and they can see that there's clearly a way that technology could speed it up, and they've used it themselves and now they want to make it available to others, that's probably something that's worth spending money on. I'm slightly wary of technology companies who are building some cool technology that they can sell to schools, because schools are a great market to sell technology into. It's not to say that all of them are building gimmicky products. There are some really great ones out there, but I think you have to come back to that question of, is this something that I really need, or is this something that's being sold to me using lots of flashy elements and cool things that it can do that actually will be used for about 2 weeks, and then the next time parents' evening rolls around, or there are 20 parents that need phoning, or it's the nativity week, this will get dropped and it will never get picked up again.
There are certain giants in the field that come to mind. They're almost going through their Steve Jobs at next phase when it comes to AI. They're not quite up to speed and quite, extremely underwhelming in terms of their offering. So I think that makes a whole lot of sense. I like the fact that it all comes down to thinking, doesn't it? As leaders, as teachers, we're critical consumers, and that's the way, like you say, I think that cost benefit ratio, that cost analysis ratio, they're going to be really important going forward, particularly as people become more aware. Because I do think there are a lot of schools where you could probably have all members of the staff, faculty don't really have an idea about this, and then, like you say, you'll have schools where one person is really engaged and really thinking about this carefully. So it'll be interesting to see what the government does in terms of awareness, because I know that safety and safeguarding with regards to the use of artificial intelligence is now on the radar. Some schools are having training, but I think there's also that how can we get the most from this, and how can we make sure that essentially what taxpayer money is protected when we make decisions about these kinds of things.
I think when you move away from the tools and more towards the service in the ways that I can see things going, it becomes less of a problem, because you are sort of doing the teacher's job, or a small part of the teacher's job, rather than having them engaging with an environment. So I can only speak for us at the moment, but at Stylus, for example, we don't have a tool that students engage with, and as such there's no really very little data protection restrictions, I think we'd say, on us. And kids do some work, handwritten work, they hand it into their teacher, and then they get a paper report back printed out for them that they can engage with and write on and so on. So it's all paper based. And I think there's going to be more of that, actually, generally, by the way. I think that actually UI, so user interfaces will recede, actually, and we'll be doing more talking to technology, and maybe even just, moving. It's now got so good that we could do, I remember I used a thing called Plickers. I don't know if you've ever used Plickers. Back in the day when I was teaching, it was already good then. And it was a QR code that kids would hold up, and they'd change it a different way. And you could just pass your mobile phone across the class, and it would register all those QR codes, and then you'd be able to do a kind of, a quick straw poll of a question that's on the board. And I was absolutely amazed when I first saw that. It was quite early on, and I was staggered. The vision tech is now good enough, easily good enough, that you could, here you do have to have some data privacy things for sure, but you'd be able to have a webcam in your room, and so hands up if you do this, whatever, and you could just pick out all those kids straight away based on where they are, and then answer it. No QR codes necessary. For example, so there'll be lots of ways where interfaces drop away, I think. So you don't have to be sitting in front of a chat window. Chat windows are actually going to be, they'll feel really archaic in a year or so's time, I think. I think it's going to be the power users that are still typing. Everybody else won't be. And for us, actually, not having kids behind screens, super important. We call it the paper hypothesis. Really good reasons for people generally, but students as they're learning to be handwriting. It's really good for brain development, much better for memory retention. And now there's a building body of evidence for it. effort, outcomes, memory, attention, all better on paper. But also staff, similarly, we don't want them behind screens. We want them thinking properly and planning, hopefully with a pen, planning the next lesson based on the things that we're able to tell them about their students. So there's a 13 plus, sticker, essentially, a theoretical sticker on some of these models, and Microsoft have got into hot water about buying into this. There's a Northern Irish company, I believe, and they put it into Teams and so on, and you can't put kids into Teams without real protections. And so it was an issue, and I don't think it necessarily will be in the near future. Certainly it isn't for us, because we're doing the service and delivering the output. There's no live engagement, it's asynchronous and so on. Yeah, trying to make that point.
I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And I'm already thinking about, I'm going to try and get, because it's only just come on my radar that people are getting trained in this, and I'm wondering who's doing the training. So I may try and find someone who's delivering this kind of training, and then see if you guys come back on with Neil, and we'll have a big round table about the future of safety and in the use of artificial intelligence. So yeah, I'm already scheming for the next episode after enjoying this one. One of the things that really gets me is the speed of this thing. I mean, October 2 years ago, the first time I heard about ChatGTP, I always get those letters mixed up. And I know that the further we go, the faster things tend to move. Where do you think the greatest gains for teacher practice / quality of life, which we've mentioned a lot, can be found in artificial intelligence, if not now, over the next 18 months to 2 years?
For me, there's two sides to this. One is coming back to that idea of letting the computers do the computer work and letting the humans do the human work. And I think if AI is able to take away some of that repetitiveness that comes with teaching of, one essay on its own, one piece of writing on its own is fine, over 30, and then that happening every day, a couple of times a week, it becomes very onerous. And I think if AI can support with that, it means teachers now have the time back to go and do the things they really enjoy doing, talking to students and collaborating with each other and planning together and getting really good as classroom practitioners who can teach an incredible lesson with just a whiteboard and a whiteboard pen and don't need to spend hours and hours planning every single activity. So I think there's that side of it. And then on the longer term, if the AI is doing some of that computer work that is tiring and exhausting and repetitive and ekes into your evenings and your weekends, we can turn teaching back into a career that is compatible with having a life outside the classroom. I think it's really sad that over the last sort of 10 or 15 years, it's become almost accepted as fact that teaching is not compatible with having a family, and it's not compatible with being able to finish work at 5 o'clock every day and then go and have hobbies. And it shouldn't be that way, because the people who are going into teaching are the people who really enjoy human interaction and helping children and helping them grow up into these really confident, successful adults who go off and do great things in the world. And if we're driving those people out of the profession because their job is no longer about doing those things, that's really sad. And I think if AI makes it easier to keep those people and attract them into the profession and turn it back into a career where you can choose a school based on whether it's the right environment for you, and you can recruit a teacher because they're a really good fit and not because you haven't had anyone in that school for the last 2 years teaching that subject and you're desperate to appoint, and you're taking the job because you've had to leave your last school and you desperately need to pay your mortgage and that's the only job available, so you'll take it. If we can get rid of that and bring back an element of choice and happiness and feeling fulfilled, then that's got to be a win. And I think that is very much possible when you have teachers driving the development of AI in the direction that they want it and where they want to use it, where they can see it being powerful, where they know it's needed, and not letting technology companies be the ones who come in and go, here's something really cool and flashy and expensive that you can say you're using AI and tick that off the list and tell everyone you're in AI school, and not actually solving the problem at the very core.
Amen. Yeah. Do you know what that is? I was realizing it's mega, making education great again.
Based on that, I'm not sure that we do.
No, I don't think so. No, but it is also mega, Anyway, no, I mean, yeah, God, couldn't agree more. It's our core driver, really, as passionate teachers that left for our own array of reasons. So for me, the answer to this, let's just sort of take a kind of 2-year view. And I've already said a couple of my predictions here. So the ones that are most relevant to education, firstly, is the sort of recession into the abilities of these models of the user interface. And alongside that, I think there's also there are various felt experience type changes that AI is going to be able to make in terms of personalization. But let's just instead just treat it slightly more hierarchically for a minute, because then you can plot out the time across that period, I think, a bit better. What we used to call AI, there's a commonly used thing, sentence in machine learning sort of AI, with the AI is the stuff that doesn't work yet, right? So as soon as AI works, it becomes software. So what we were calling AI is now just algorithms, and it's when it was whatever the cutting edge is what we call AI. And then whenever something is a bit more impressive, the previous people say, start saying, well, we're what AI used to be. And there are some prominent providers who I won't name any names or anything, but there are some who sort of made their name through AI, and really they now put their hands up and they say, well, that was really machine learning. It was kind of what Netflix was doing. It's like we're doing a selection process for the next thing to show to kids. In that kind of application, there's only a few things really that you can change in order to improve the way that students engage with it. There's sort of the difficulty level of what they get shown. There's the type, the sort of medium, is it a video, is it questions, whatever. And then there's the order, sequencing. So sequencing is really important, right? But then essentially that's all that you were able to change. It's like, which thing are we going to do and how do I show it to you? And then as generative AI has taken place of old AI, right? Generative AI is now able to do a lot more. It's actually 0 to 1, we sometimes say, which is a kind of, it's a step change in ability. So it's not just doing it more at scale, it's a step change. And now we can do things that previously did have to be a person. So we can personalize things. We can say, based on what you've done, say, it might be a bit error filled, but essentially we are producing novel text about a kid. So that there's a slew of really important and potentially extremely beneficial things in here. So a lot of our feedback, for example, it is, we still go with the classic, what went well, even better if, next step, right? What do I do about it now? And we can make them really, really simple. And, because of the way that we are able to, and this is not just us, this is more broadly, education generally would be able to take what we know about a kid and put it into a prompt or set of prompts, and then produce a comment which was not just applicable to that piece of work, but also to the student. So we could use their reading age if we put it in there and make it simpler. We could, for example, one of the things that we do actually on our reports is we put a little pop-up box that gets added on that paper report if the student is an EAL student. So if English is not their first language, they get a little home language translation box saying, on this piece of feedback, da-da-da-da happens, in order to try and, to make another type of scaffolding for them with the feedback. So that's all in this middle bit, which is clearly beneficial, and you can do at scale, vast scale. And that's the thing that I was talking about earlier, and that is really beneficial in this space. When you find something that actually works, that is not error prone and is valuable, you can do it as much as you want and as many times as you want at any time of day or night, right? Sort of thing. But for me, the next period of time is actually going to be about the embedding of these, so the proving of these to start with. So the next year will be a lot about trust. It'll be a lot about us being able to get people confident that actually they're getting a benefit consistently, and to rely on a service, say. And that's certainly something that we want to be able to provide, reliable service that people find very, very helpful. And that takes time. We've done a lot of work and we're only doing one tiny specific thing. There's one use case at the moment, whereas we know that we can do pretty much the same thing anywhere, theoretically. But we've only just done this one tiny bit. So the next year will be that. And there'll be lots of other gimmicks that come in because of new features that models are able to do. But really the proper work will be there. And then we'll be moving into what I call, I guess, the beginning of the superhuman capabilities. So these are the things that are not just 0 to 1 because they can suddenly do what a human can do, but it's things that are another 0 to 1. It's another step change, of superhuman ability. And there are only a handful of these at the moment, but they do exist. So, for example, we aren't able to put all of the work that a student has ever done in meticulous detail into our working memories at once, in order to say, with respect to their newest piece of work, how their progress is manifesting. You know, we can't say immediately, okay, so looking at this, I know that 3 pieces of work ago you did such and such, which was really good, and then you haven't done that since you've done it here, so that's really good. You come back to that, make sure you keep doing that, remember that. However, you've never done this still, you know, in all of your pieces of work, even though in this case here you did this, and, you know, you used this piece of punctuation correctly here, but you're yet to still do this construction, which would work really well in this piece of, you know, in this area of your writing. This is now easily available through the long context window of the longest model. So that, you know, for example, the new state of the art for what they call the needle in the haystack test, which is where you get one tiny piece of information and you put it within hundreds of thousands of tokens of information. It's like saying, you know, it's like putting in a statement about your school specifically in the whole works of Shakespeare, and then you ask the model something about your school. It will find it, tell you where it is, and tell you that fact of information. So, you know, it's the state of the art. Gemini 1.5 Pro, it's called. And we would be able to now put in all of the meticulous detail about the technical accuracy delivered and everything else, theoretically, that a student had ever done into that long context window, which is something that we would never be able to do, certainly not at scale and very, very quickly. But anyway, we can't put all that information in our minds at once. So suddenly there'll be lots of, we haven't thought of them all, you know, there'll be lots of ways that we can use this information in order to benefit that student and benefit our understanding of that student. And that is a superhuman capability that once we've got the error rate right down and we can trust, you know, and we've been doing the work to get all of the data into the system through scanning or whatever, that's what we do, then we've got some really, really exciting opportunities available to us, which, you know, talk about, we did some work on this intervention at scale thing where lots of maths, individual formative pieces of information about, you know, what kids can and couldn't do in their mathematics knowledge and skills. You know, we used that to get just the kids that didn't know this one tiny specific thing that was a fundamental prerequisite of lots of other mathematics points in their current place in the curriculum. We would get them together from a number of schools and just teach them that for 20 minutes, right? Really, really impactful across a broad array of kids. You know, when you include this ability of a long context model to see everything that they've ever done, you know, the idea that you'd be able to say, okay, so that you've got 20 minutes, have you, on a Thursday after school? What you should do is, you know, or our suggestion of what you should do is this with these kids in this way for these reasons. And that is super powerful. And then you can be the very, very human teacher, having the relationships, wielding everything you know about education and about those kids. But you don't have to do, you know, it's impossible to do partly that job, but, you know, your own sort of badly cobbled together version of that job, because the suggestion is there for you to use or not use. But, you know, that as a run rate thing, that would be really, really mega. And we're going to be able to do that soon.
Sounds exciting. I'm definitely going to be keeping my eyes peeled, both for announcements. I mean, I know you're on LinkedIn. Any other social media networks you guys use?
We're on LinkedIn. We're also on X, which I need to start calling X and not Twitter. So we're just at Stylus Education on there.
Awesome. I'm also going to add superhuman capabilities to my filter when I'm looking at the new information on where artificial intelligence is going to. I mean, that sounds fantastic. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys about this today. I'm very excited. Certainly less skeptical than I was at the start of the conversation, which is a running theme last time when Neil, it was basically proved to me that there's a point in even talking about this. And he did. And you guys have shown me actually the future could be very, very exciting. It's not long until our conference in January. So in January 18th, obviously raising money for Valindra. You guys are going to be there. Hannah, what are you going to be talking about on the day?
We're going to be talking about progress in marking and assessing and offering feedback on handwritten work. So this has been our focus for the last, it'll be over a year by January 18th. And we've been testing it in schools over the last term, and got some very kind Discovery schools who've been sending us lots of work to test out through the whole process. So we're going to be giving feedback on what we've learned about how you can train AI to think like the most effective teacher, and to give feedback in the way that the most effective teachers would do that.
Really looking forward to it. And so if anyone's listening, they haven't got their tickets yet, now is probably the time. It might even be the perfect Christmas present for the teacher to stop in or at home, this festive season. So, get them while you possibly can. All that's left to do is say thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much, Hannah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominic.
Thanks so much for having us, Kieran.
And everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.